Today, I'm in the ancient city of Eboracum, Eferic, Jorvik, or as it's known today, York. The reason I'm here sharing this video with you is because York is a very interesting place. What the city represents and the area around it go all the way back into our ancient history. And then we go into the time of the Romans, and then to the time of the Saxons coming up here, all the way to the Danish Vikings coming and invading and establishing Jorvik, and eventually to the city that people visit in droves now. And so in this video, I'm just going to share with you the history of ancient York, particularly when it comes to the ancient religious history, because the ancient gods of York are really interesting, and I'm very excited to share them with you. But first, we're going to stop off here in the museum to see what awaits us inside, and supposedly the Star Carr stuff is here, which is some of the oldest examples of potential religious iconography in the world. So really excited to share with you everything here in this video discussing the ancient city of York.
The site of Star Carr is located in North Yorkshire. This site holds some of the earliest evidence of human life in the UK. But what makes it truly unique are the mysterious artifacts that are found there. In 1947, an archaeologist named Graham Clark led the excavation of Star Carr. What he uncovered was a site dating back to 9000 BCE. Among the thousands of items unearthed were bone tools, flint, weapons, and most significantly, red deer skull caps that appear to have been worn as masks. These skull caps were the key to understanding the ritual significance of this site. But why did these ancient humans make them? That's where the mystery deepens. The site of Star Carr sat next to a now vanished lake where ancient hunter-gathering people would have come together. These red deer skulls were not just hunting trophies. Archaeologists believe they played a role in ritual ceremonies, possibly worn during shamanic rites to connect with the spirit of the animal, or even used in hunting magic to ensure successful hunts. In addition to these skull caps, other ritual items have been found, including wooden platforms that may have been used for ceremonial purposes, as well as animal bones suggesting sacrifices. This points to Star Carr being much more than just a settlement. It may have been a very sacred site for rituals that shaped the spiritual life of these once ancient people.
Seeing the Star Carr headdresses in person is really cool, because when I was starting this video and I said these are like some of the oldest religious objects in the world, this is not an exaggeration, because it's so hard to say whether or not something's spiritual or religious in origin, especially when we don't have written source material. But the very fact that people were putting on these masks for some reason, really it's kind of down to two things. They were probably hunting with them, or it was down to some spiritual significance, or the both combined. And so just looking at these and knowing that possibly, very high probability that 10,000 years ago, people were using these for some kind of ceremony or ritual. That's really cool. And getting to be there and see them with my own eyes, even more incredible.
When it comes to known history after Star Carr, we are left waiting till around the time of the Romans, who recorded about two main Celtic tribes who existed here in the past, the Brigantes and the Parisi. These tribes likely worshipped a range of nature gods, spirits, and ancestral deities, which is known to the common Celtic belief system. We know their gods would have been tied closely to the land, including sacred groves and rivers. But much of the specific worship remains a mystery. The rivers that they worshipped were often closely associated to the gods they worshipped as well, as we know that they threw their offerings into these rivers. The main river running through York today is the River Wease, and during my research I couldn't find any significance to the river's name or anything that would have been done in the ancient past. But when returning back to the Romans, they first established the city we know as York today in 71 CE, naming the city Eboracum, meaning the place of the yew trees. This name in itself could be a sign of significance to the Celtic people who lived near here before, as yew groves were often associated with the Druids. The city of Eboracum grew quite rapidly, housing around 6,000 soldiers at its height, and it soon became one of Britain's major cities to the ancient Romans, known simply as a colonia. The Romans, of course, brought their own pantheon of deities such as Mars, Jupiter, and Hercules. Now, York wasn't just a military encampment. Goddesses such as Fortuna were also worshipped here, showing its trading significance to even the ancient Romans. In the city of York, there is evidence of the cult of Mithras having a temple, but the cult of Mithras also had a temple along Hadrian's Wall, not too far away. Now, if you want to learn more about the cult of Mithras, it's really interesting, and that's why I made a whole video about it last year that you can still check out on my channel. Hey everyone. This is voiceover Jacob. If you didn't know, it's really hard to record on the go, and that is why I'm under a duvet right now recording so you can have better audio. If you appreciate the work I do here, please think about liking, subscribing, all that good YouTuber stuff. But also, I wrote a book recently named A Glastonbury Tourist. So if you want to support me, you simply just have to purchase this book, and then you get an over 400-page book containing a fictional story about a lot of the spiritual experiences I've had. So I've tried to contain a lot of lessons in here. I mean, there's sweat lodges, there's stories about Beltane, there's plant medicine in here, and I really think you're going to enjoy it. So if you want to support this channel and get a really cool book in the process, think about picking up A Glastonbury Tourist, or if you want to support me directly, think about supporting me on Patreon or YouTube members. But with that, it's getting very warm in here and I still have a little bit more of the voiceover to go. So I hope you enjoyed the rest of this video exploring the ancient city of York. Remarkably, in Eboracum, there was also a temple dedicated to the Greco-Egyptian deity Serapis, which is a blending of Osiris and Apis from the Egyptian world. Now, I could also make an entire video on Serapis, but also the idea of combining deities. It's really interesting, but what to really focus on here for this video is the fact that Serapis is a Greco-Egyptian deity being worshipped in the north of Britain. It's really cool, and this is the stuff that really gets me excited about learning about ancient religions. Now, towards the end of the Roman Empire, Christianity would have been introduced into York in around 400 CE, but it's really hard to say how far back this goes, but this is just important for later on, is that Christianity was already established before the Saxons and the Danes arrived. In the following centuries, the Germanic Angles started to arrive and renamed the city Eboracum, which simply translates to Wild Boar Town. The early Anglo-Saxons likely brought their own gods, including Woden and Thunar, but by the 7th century, Eboracum became a center of Christianity, especially in the Northumbrian kingdom. Now, while the Saxons did leave some amazing pieces behind showing their Germanic pagan roots, such as this helmet, that's not as lavishly styled as the Sutton Hoo find, but it is more well preserved. Sadly, I've not been able to find too much about the Saxon history here, and so if you know more, please let me know down below.
Hopefully I'm able to transcribe to you the reason why I find York so interesting, I found this research so fascinating, is because this place really represents the strange layers of history. And especially in our modern talks on paganism and spirituality, I think a lot of people get over obsessed with this terminology of like Norse pagan versus Celtic pagan, and I definitely have in the past as well. But when looking at a place like York, this is a place that has Danish history, so Scandinavian, Old Norse history. This is a place that has Celtic history. It's a place that has Roman history. So many different gods and heroes were worshipped here at various points in history. And that's really cool. And so being in a place like this, it's not Norse pagan, it's not Celtic pagan, it's not Roman pagan, it's everything. It's history, it's humanity. And that's really cool to know that all these varieties of gods and deities were worshipped here at some point. So I've only been here for like a day, so just to kind of give you a bit of the experience, like the York experience. It's very touristy, like a lot of people come here on holiday, like a weekend holiday in particular. And so it is very busy. So everything's kind of been pre-booked, and so I've been kind of rushing around. I've not really been able to slow down and savor everything. And it's England, so lots of people drinking, of course. Lots of people on stag do's. So I am here on the weekend, so it makes it a little bit more difficult. And so if you're looking to do this for the historical angle of everything, maybe choose a weekday. But this is my first time actually here, and it is really cool experience in the sense of just the history. I mean, walking around everywhere. Yeah, you have your modern stores. I'm sure I just walked by a Greg's at some point and a Starbucks. Oh, there's a Starbucks right there. But there is plenty of really old stuff. So, like that. That's just really cool. And there's a lot of like Harry Potter fans here as well, as like the Harry Potter vibes that people look for. And so the famous street that a lot of people come here for is just really busy. So yeah, that's just kind of the review of York itself, as we're in transition over to the Jorvik Center to learn about the Viking stuff, which I've already researched beforehand, but it's still going to be cool to see and share with you as I discuss the Viking Age and the history here in Jorvik. Precursor before we actually begin the Viking section of this video. So I came into this experience not really knowing what to expect when it came to the Jorvik Viking Center. I was told it was a little bit cheesy, but I didn't know it was ride along through history in a Viking village history kind of cheesy. But it was kind of fun, and so I'm going to play for you the footage of what I saw during the Jorvik Viking Center experience. And the only thing I'm not going to be able to transcribe to you is the smell, because they thought it would be a good idea to make you smell history. And so they pump different smells throughout the entire ride. And so you smell different things, some good, some bad, particularly really bad when you pass by a figure, a vestige of a man taking a giant poo, which is at the center of a lot of the history around the Jorvik Center. Anyways, I hope you enjoy this ride through history without the smells, but I'm going to overlay facts and information and all that stuff. But it definitely is, it's a little interesting.
In 866, the great heathen army captured the city of Eboracum. They renamed Eboracum the city of Jorvik. Now, this name translates to Boar Bay, so it maintains some of its original name. Jorvik was not just a military stronghold to the ancient Vikings, it was also a vibrant center of trade. Many Viking merchants brought their goods from across the known world, including silk from the east, silver from the Middle East, and furs from Scandinavia. This made Jorvik one of the most cosmopolitan cities of its time, despite the short period in which the Vikings ruled. Modern excavations into the city of York have revealed thousands of artifacts likely tied to the Vikings, including coins, tools, and beautiful jewelry, but also remains of their buildings that they constructed here, food scraps, and even a really famous poo.
One of the main things within the Jorvik Viking Center is this giant thing of poo, which I guess was like the famous thing that put York on the map as far as like a Viking place, is when they discovered a gigantic fossilized turd in the 70s. And apparently this was really big. So this is what allowed for this center to be built. And the whole thing kind of smells like poo. And they're like, yeah, the whole thing's kind of funded by poo. And I'm like, oh, yeah, it really kind of is. And yeah, take with that as you will. But history is interesting, and the way history is preserved is even more interesting.
The Kingdom of Jorvik was established in 875, and notable Viking leaders such as Ivar the Boneless, Halfdan Ragnarsson, and Eric Bloodaxe have all left their mark on the city. Which is one of the reasons that Jorvik has received such attention in media such as the Vikings TV show and Assassin's Creed Valhalla, creating grand images of the Viking capital of England. And although the Vikings would have brought their own gods such as Odin, Thor, and Freya, there's little surviving evidence of pagan worship within the city. Christianity was already well established within the city, and this only led to quicker conversions to the Danes that settled here. The story of Jorvik is also not a peaceful one either. It changed hands between the Vikings and the Anglo-Saxons several times during its brief existence. And just to give you an idea of that, here's a quick and not complete summary of the different changings of hands. In 866, the city was captured by the Great Heathen Army under Ivar the Boneless, and then in 876, Halfdan Ragnarsson settled it in Jorvik, establishing it as a Viking kingdom. However, he died in 877 in a battle, leading to a Christian ruler taking his place. And then after the death of this Christian ruler, there was a lot of exchanging of hands between the Vikings of Dublin, who took control of Jorvik for some time. And then in 927, King Athelstan of Wessex conquered Jorvik, incorporating it into his growing English kingdom, temporarily ending Viking rule. And then in 939, after Athelstan's death, the Vikings regained control of Jorvik under the King Olaf Guthfrithson of Dublin, marking a resurgence of Norse power in the region. And then once again in 944, the Anglo-Saxon King Edmund I reconquered Jorvik, once again bringing under English rule. And then in 947, only 3 years later, the Vikings returned under Eric Bloodaxe, a Norwegian king who had briefly re-established Norse power here in Jorvik before being removed in 948. And then once again in 952, Eric Bloodaxe returned to briefly control it for 2 more years before he was killed in 954, officially closing the chapter on the city of Jorvik. Clearly, this turbulent history does not lead well to an established culture, particularly a religious one, so it's amazing what has survived in the brief, less than 200-year period that the Vikings controlled the city of Jorvik.
Yeah, the Jorvik Viking Center was definitely not what I expected, but I have seen a lot of different Viking exhibits all around the world, which I'm really grateful for. I mean, this goes all the way back to me being a teenager when Viking artifacts toured through Cincinnati around where I'm from. And I was able to see them long time ago, and now I've been able to see them in all the Scandinavian countries. I've been able to see them here in the UK, at the Jorvik Viking Center, at Dunbliniya in Ireland. And so I'm able to definitely kind of gauge where they're at. And actually the Jorvik Viking Center isn't too bad. Mostly, you know, it is cheesy. If it was just the ride, it would be a little too much for me. However, they do have a lot of artifacts there. And I think the big takeaway when it comes to the artifacts is what I've already mentioned in the voiceover section of this video. It's the fact that the Viking age here was really short. And the religious history of the Vikings is also not very significant, if barely existing at all. When the Vikings came over here, Christianity was already well established in the city of York. And as it turned into Jorvik, even though the Vikings were coming in, this was the time when a lot of Vikings were starting to convert into Christianity already. I did not see a single religious artifact when it came to like a Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, or any religious iconography when it comes to the Scandinavian people that lived here. So when it comes to the history of Jorvik, even though it was controlled by the Danes and the Danish Vikings for quite some time, the actual spiritual history is not that significant. So were people here worshiping the Old Norse gods of Odin, of Thor, of Freyr, of Freya? More than likely, but it wasn't something that this was like a pagan mecca. If anything, this was a really big symbol at the end of the pagan era of the Viking age, as Jorvik really is kind of like the blueprint for both the height, but also the end of the Viking age and the pagan era of Britain. All right, so this is the end of the day here in York. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I know it's been a bit chaotic. I didn't know how filming here was going to go, but I hope you've enjoyed this information. I hope you enjoyed the history. It's a really interesting town. It is really busy, but it's really cool and cute. There's a reason people like coming here, and the reason I like coming here is because of the history. So if it's something that you're interested in the future, I hope you're able to come here and enjoy the many different layers of history that are all contained within the city of York. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining me for this video, and I'll see you in the next video here at the Wisdom of Odin, and I hope you check out my previous videos exploring different museums and ancient sites all around the world.